All right, well, thank you for staying. My name is Wendy Bendoni. I am the chair of the marketing department as well as the fashion marketing department. So today, those that have taken my class know that I love slides. So I tried to break this down as much as I could to really kind of give you a snapshot of what's happening in social media. I typically like to say digital media because social media, I feel like we limit ourselves a little bit. So I'm going to give you a quick snapshot of what is happening in digital media. So the first thing that we've mentioned over and over is instant gratification. And I want to bring this up one more time because I love when I'm talking in class and I say that there's a short attention span, everybody wants everything right away, and everybody's looking down at their phone. I'm like, yes. So I have to keep your attention. The other part of it, which we've talked about a little bit, is the attention span. And you'll find in marketing, everybody has different opinions. One of the things that you really have to do is we have to be really creative to get your attention, okay? We have seen so many things on social media. The attention span is so short. So we say that it's an 8-second attention span, and I always like to use the reference that the goldfish has a 9-second attention span. Then with that, there's some companies that Tastemade, which is amazing in digital content, and they say you really have 3 seconds before you're moving on to the next thing. Because if you think about when you're looking at social media, nobody is sitting there looking at each post. You are like tapping through, sliding through. You're not really taking a long time. So I love when people say that in marketing we're not creative because we have to be extra creative to get your attention. So the other thing I really love is when people share something or they don't even read it. Or they like something and I'm like, what did you like? Oh, I don't know. I'm like, but you like, okay. So this is another complex thing that we have to figure out, well, did you even read what you shared? So I'm going to break down 10, yes, I copied you, I know. I wanted to break down 10 areas that I want you to think about. Now, we've talked about understanding Gen Z. And I recently went to an influencer marketing conference, which, by the way, there's like one every week. So I went to this, and one of the things they were talking about was Gen Z. But I like to refer Gen Z thinking about popular culture. So if you look up here and you immediately know at least 2, 3, or 4 of these people are, you're probably Gen Z. If you are looking at these people and you're like, who the heck are any of those people? You are not Gen Z. But as marketers, we have to understand every cohort group. And why they are important is, most of the time we keep thinking Gen Z are these little kids. Well, they're 24. So they are part of our marketing strategy. So we have to constantly think, how are we going to get their attention? And what is their importance? So who's shopping? What are you selling? What are you promoting? So Gen Z does have to be part of the mix. So now we just made things more complex. We want you to market towards millennials as well as Gen Z and everybody else in between. So once again, probably not Gen Z if you don't know who this is. But this was a big ordeal having to do with a YouTuber who's 19 years old, James Charles. And Tati said a couple things, and he basically lost 3 million followers. But what I find really interesting is that my 12 and 15-year-old are all on the live feed on YouTube watching him lose followers. And this is a known phenomenon. Pretty much if you're Gen Z, you're aware of this. Even if you don't want to be aware of it, you're aware of it. But what I found really interesting, there was a lecture that I went to. He was an agent at CAA, which is a very large managing of like entertainment stars. Well, he used to manage Will Smith. And he would have these dinners. And when he had these dinners, he realized in one room, he was reaching over 15 million people. Hence, he quit managing and opened up his own digital agency and decided to kind of tap more into the movie industry from a social media standpoint. And one thing that he brought up, which I found really interesting, is he was talking about the Super Bowl. Okay, well, if anybody follows football, you probably won't watch the Patriots anyway, but whatever. So part of this is that you have 98 million people watching this, right? Which we all know the commercials. You pay a lot of money for the commercials. But what's really interesting is look how many views James Charles' YouTube site gets. Part of this is because nobody watches these things once. They watch them over and over. That's a very Gen Z kind of way of doing things. Then you have 5 billion videos that are being watched on YouTube every single day. So that moment of the Super Bowl is now being kind of taken over by this new kind of media, which is why YouTube is a media channel in itself. So once again, talking about Gen Z and understanding how people use social media. Being that I have a 15-year-old, I took her, she could no longer use her phone. But I welcomed if she wanted to do some other things on it. Quickly finding out that they only use Snapchat to text each other. It wasn't using text, and they were just using it to text, and then for your eyes only, images that I wasn't allowed to get. So hence, I am not a good mom to have. So, but looking at this, you're seeing that millennials are still using it, but different ways. So it's really also knowing the behavior behind the social media. And that's why I find Gen Z and millennials so interesting, because they are very different. So as a marketer, even though I may not know James Charles and watch all his videos, I have to understand that culture to kind of predict what is going to come next. So no big shock, Facebook is really low here. But what I wanted you to start looking at is what they're using. So millennials now, there was a point where we would use Snapchat and then we would use Instagram, but we liked Snapchat stories, but now we tend to go on Instagram stories because that's a little bit easier because we really don't want to do multiple different social media. It really is overwhelming just to even take in the content, let alone building the content and all the different platforms. So another trend that kind of came into play was music, right? So how many of you guys have ever heard of Musical.ly? All right, how about TikTok? Once again, well, besides you in the industry, it's a very Gen Z kind of thing, right? And what I really love is that Gen Z actually says they hate it, but they're addicted to it. So constantly, it's basically lip syncing to songs. And these are some of the, the ones that are standing out. But what I found really interesting is how quickly TikTok is going up. Okay, because it's, once again, they like anything the older generation is not on. That is definitely a Gen Z-ism. So adding music, tying music, and why is this important? Because this is actually giving more content, because most of the time, you would add music, you'd rip it, you'd put it on Instagram, and guess what? It was taken off. So it was really nice when now they're enabling us to put music on, just like Musical.ly or TikTok. All right, so then I want to go to the area of stories. We all say as marketers, we love to tell stories. Well, not all of us tell really good stories. Some of them are boring. Well, the same thing with social media. It's like, how do you tell a good story? And is stories important to marketing? So the first thing is, of course, Snapchat kind of like led the way in telling a story, right? Once again, very short, very quick, right to the point. We all were a little upset when they changed it a little bit, but we've all adapted over time now. So then the idea is Instagram then jumped onto the bandwagon. So once again, you have 77 million people using Instagram and watching and following through the stories, which is one more way that we can get the attention of the consumer that we want to talk about our products or services that we're doing. So I found this graph really interesting. I wanted to share it with you. Which is the idea of when did the stories start? Well, they started with Snapchat, and then we had Instagram take over, WhatsApp take over into Facebook, which Facebook, they're pushing it more and more, but they say we're going to see even more changes by the middle of summer. And then LinkedIn, which is, this kind of, we don't really think about that, but LinkedIn is spending a lot of time on working with their LinkedIn influencers, stories, still a little bit of problem with the video aspect of it. But, once again, it's this idea of telling a story, but be sure you're telling a story well. All right, so this is something that's very interesting. I love social media. I have challenged my students. A lot of times I actually use social media more than they use social media. But there is a reason for this. And when I was doing some research on addiction to social media, There's an amazing professor, and he had done research in regards to addiction. So I feel like there's also this responsibility as a marketer to be sure that what we're putting out there can be put in a way where it's a little bit more positive. Having 2 teenage daughters, I've seen firsthand lots of things that have come up. And there's not a lot of protection out there. So definitely looking into this area, not only addiction, but also what is being posted. So how many of you guys ever saw the egg? Did anybody like the egg? Nobody liked the egg? So the whole thing about the egg, which I found really interesting, to be a Kylie Jenner. So Kylie Jenner had 18 million people like this post of her child, and they wanted to beat it. So guess what? They beat it. They got 34 million. But what was really interesting in the end is that this ended up being more of a service of, are you addicted to social media? Do you have, and giving a site where it could basically walk you through, which I was very scared to see. I'm like, oh, wow, I kind of do a lot of those. Okay, oops. But going through and seeing what are some of the addictive kind of personalities, things that come with being on social media. Once again, I love it. I teach it. But having different ways of looking and being a little bit more social responsible. So those of you who know me know there is absolutely no way I'm not going to talk about AR or VR. I am completely addicted. I love it. I see lots of different ways that it can be used, and I see a lot of different ways that people are doing it wrong. So I wanted to tie in just a couple of people that are doing it right. And one of the first one is Sephora, which we all, when we go into Sephora, you want to be able to try things on and see what it looks like. So this is an amazing feature, not so unusual and not gimmicky. That's the problem with AR, VR. Everything's so gimmicky. Like, we really need a practical use of why you're using it. This is still my favorite. So most people nowadays tend to work a lot from home in satellite kind of situations where maybe you're talking overseas and you're working from your dining room table. Well, wouldn't it be great if you had an app that you didn't have to do your makeup? It would just put your makeup on. So welcome to this new app that you can sit and now your makeup is on. There you go. Ta-da. Very easy. So this one, it's funny with AI. So some of my research is in Switzerland for the independent Swiss watchmakers. So independent Swiss watchmakers, amazing industry, but one of the things that there is a little fear of is AI and any kind of machine learning. So I decided, like always, to do a presentation on how they could use machine learning because most of the watches are not being sold online, okay? You have to go to the store to buy the watches. So my research was on finding different ways to use technology to help sell things without necessarily selling something. It's more about the idea of making it a concierge kind of service, where we know if you wear an IWC watch that you like, speed racing, you like golf, you like all these different things. So tying that with Kickstart companies that had the AI or some kind of augmented reality tied into it. So once again, new areas of there being a need for this, but when you go into kind of, heritage companies, it's a little bit hard to kind of transition into how they can go into that. All right, invisible technology, I always have to show this. Pretty much I creep everybody out. But one of the first things is the idea of Google's patents. So yes, Google owns the heart. They own that. And they also own, if you think of like the movie kind of idea. And what is that? So basically, what are they going to do with that? That doesn't mean they're going to sue you every time you do that in a photo. It's basically the idea of using it as markers. So when you start using augmented reality or things like that, you need some type of place markers. So this is because in a positive light, if you use the heart, that is in a positive way. You're not saying I hate somebody and putting a heart up. So it's recognizing this and kind of tying it on, which is the idea of this invisible technology. So another one, which is facial recognition. And we were tying this also to social media so that people would be aware when you go into a certain store. Well, I don't know if anybody of you got into lollipops, but basically they have facial recognition. You have to sign up for it, which still, I don't get the thing. I'm like, so wait, are you still taking my face when I walk in? I'm a little unsure here. But basically it would recognize, are you allergic to nuts? Do you like dark chocolate? What do you like? So that when you come in, you get a definite kind of personalized, what you were talking about, this personalized experience. But once again, this is still that I'm not so sure I'm comfortable with that yet, right? All right, so now to the seventh trend, which is in the area of virtual influencers. So they were calling them AI influencers, but they're not AI, they're actually CGI. So CGI influencers. So CGI influencers have been coming into the market, and we've been seeing them. This is Michaela, which is one of the largest, I think she has 1.5 million followers at this point. And what I started doing research on is, first of all, in marketing, measuring your influencer is a really hard metrics to get. Because as marketers, we want conversion. We want to know what's sold. And when you go to a client or when you're hiring an agency, that is the last thing they will ever tell you. They will tell you all these other things. So one of the things that I wanted to see is, what kind of digital footprint are these virtual influencers making? So I wrote a paper, so that's what I do. And I wrote a paper on virtual influencers. And what happened when I did this is this influencer is owned by a brand, which is called Yux, which is part of Net-a-Porter, which is a very high-end luxury brand. And basically, they didn't lose any followers and brought her on instead of having a paid influencer, right? So you can tell all my influencer friends aren't so happy about this. Then to make it worse is they are actually making this influencer, their CGI influencer, model with real influencers. So the idea is this something that's going to disrupt? So I'm always looking for something new, something that's happening, and not necessarily be the first one, but to say, is this really going to make an impact? It's making an impact. It already is. I already pulled the matrix looking at how is it making an impact? How is it helping the brand? And it is. All right, so digital native tribes. So we talked about data a lot today. And data is really interesting, and there is a lot of data. But not a lot of people know how to put data into action. And then as marketers, a lot of times we'll look at like social media and we'll look at, what are they saying about your brand? That was like the common thing. It's like, they're going to talk about your brand whether you're listening or not, right? So we put on to social listening to say, what are they saying about the brand? Once again, another paper that I did for the Swiss luxury watches. And there was a company that had over 1 million followers, but their sales still weren't increasing. The watches start at about $300,000 or up. So even though they had 1 million followers, that did not necessarily mean that was going to convert into sales. So what I just decided to do was use an affinity analysis, which basically is a preset program that scrapes through the social. And I looked at their audience, and I wanted to see who was this audience. Where did they like to shop? What were the last 5 videos they watched? What images were they bringing up? So this software that I found was actually used for the entertainment industry. I decided to use it in a different context, which was using this to basically understand who their target market was. So from this, I pulled, and I could find out that their customer that would purchase this watch would be somebody that literature was on Twitter, their influencers were actually writers, sports broadcasts. So I found out all this information by just scraping through their social media software. Their social media followers. So then going through this, and one of the things that I push a lot is age agnostic, meaning not put it more demographic, put it more psychographic, and kind of understanding their behavior and knowing that even though there may be a gentleman that's 75 years old and has this watch, there also might be a 28-year-old that wants the same watch. So looking at more of their lifestyle and their likes to kind of track what was coming next. All right, so drivers of change. So in marketing and forecasting, you're always looking for what are the drivers of change. What is something new that is happening and a learned behavior? So a perfect example is Amazon. So on Amazon, pretty sure everybody's aware of Prime, right? So if you can get it tomorrow, are you gonna say, no, send it next week, that's fine? No, you're gonna say, I want it tomorrow. Right? Which, welcome now, all websites were like annoyed, like, what do you mean you're charging us? What do you mean I have to wait 5 days to get something? It's a learned behavior. So we have now things on our phones such as Uber. And the idea with Uber is that, once it's in a location for a certain amount of time, the amount of time that you will wait for an Uber keeps going down. So when it first started, we were all so happy because usually it would take 45 minutes to an hour to get a taxi. Now you only had to wait 15 minutes, where now if it's over 5 minutes, most consumers aren't going to wait. They're going to cancel that. Like, what do you mean I have to wait 15 minutes? Then also the idea of Postmates and lots of the other things that follow is, getting food delivered to you and having that kind of convenience, which once again is that on-demand kind of way of thinking, right? So with that, favorite app, oh my gosh, I forgot to get gas. What am I going to do? Oh, I'll just call it up and they'll fill my car up and then I'll jump in and then I'll make my way there. So that's lovely. Then the other idea is on demand. So once again, I am also the chair of fashion marketing. So consumers don't want to wait, they want it now. So one of the kind of ways this has changed is because it used to be all these high-end fashion shows were private shows. They were not open to the consumers. Then we invited what we called citizen journalists, which are basically bloggers, and we invited them and we let everybody see the collections that actually weren't going to be available for 6 months. Well, like kind of the Amazon way of thinking, the consumers are not watching the shows going, oh my gosh, I can't wait for 6 months to get that shoe. No, they're Googling, they're looking image recognition, and they're going through and finding this shoe immediately. So this doesn't change. I was doing a presentation, the woman in the front took her camera, started taking photographs of my shoes. I'm like, oh, she likes my shoes. And then next thing you know, after the presentation, she told me she bought them. So it was like Shazam for shoes, very dangerous. So, but this is software that's out there, and you could go through and basically purchase just like you would a song that you would hear. All right, so the last trend, so social listening. So once again, I mentioned I'm in the area of fashion, which is really more of a lifestyle kind of idea. So when I'm tracking a trend, I really track behavior, lifestyle, and then I can tie that into what kind of wine are they going to want, what kind of music are they going to be wanting to listen to, and what kind of clothes maybe would they want to purchase, because it's really about a snapshot of everything. So when I first started out doing this, I had the best job in the world. 5 times a year for 18 years, I would go to Europe and take pictures in Saint-Tropez and London, and it was lovely. Well, now I sit and I look at a lot of data. And I look at the data and I analyze how many people are talking in a positive way about something, maybe in a negative way about something, and then using that to kind of generate what the next trend is. So over time, there has been new software that keeps coming out. The great thing about also being part of academics and research is that I can get all the software and I can look at it and I can really analyze what is going to give us the best results. So with this, I'll track how many people searched for this. I'll look at how many people said positive, negative on social media, how many shared, and then through that, I can start to pinpoint where the trend is going. There are algorithms that they're working on to predict another trend, which we're still waiting to see how that works out. But, as a forecaster in anything, we used to be pretty solid, this is what it's going to be like. But it really takes one influencer, one thing to just throw it completely off. So you really have to be reactive in everything you do. That's why software such as this software from Edited would be a good software to kind of look at to monitor the different trends. So this is just an overview of some of the trends that I talked about. Once again, it's, in the world of fashion and the world of lifestyle, I mean, any type of trends, I think in marketing, you have to look at all your tools and really figure out what is the most actionable way that you can help either your customer, your own brand. But one of the best things that I find is really just listening and monitoring and then coming back, and from that point, then you can kind of make your overall kind of marketing strategy. So thank you guys for your time.